our final meeting before the draft report, that you will give clarity to our discussions. We pray that you shall continue to guard and bless all of us who are part of this meeting, look down upon our nation in mercy, and grant peace and security to the land. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you, Marshall. Good morning, everyone. We will begin now and with a few notes to make.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Charles.
Before we proceed, I just want to ask a quick question.
Sure.
That came up yesterday, on Monday. Was it Tuesday? Sorry. In relation to a clause that we had looked at, which is 10.7C. 10.7C, which created some offenses. Well, C created an offense as part of 10.7. And I believe the decision was that it would be removed.
Right.
And because it
was covered. It was said it was covered by B and E.
Right. Now, if you look on C though, Mr. Chairman, and I'll take, that is for clarification really. C says knowing the enrolls or attempts to enroll. So there's a knowing the enrolling or you are attempting to enroll. B, which I believe it was suggested to us, would cover C as well as E would cover C. That's why it was proposed that C could be removed. I could see it covering the knowing the enrolls aspect of C, but does it cover also the attempt to enroll? Because E says provides false information. But suppose you do not, you attempt to enroll again, but you do not provide information, because as I understand it, a person may not necessarily have to provide every bit of information in order to get enrolled.
All right. Senator Sinclair, before answering, I'm going to ask the CPC and Jamaica to respond to you, not immediately.
Yes, sir.
But maybe in a short while, if you don't mind.
I don't mind that. I was just wondering about the attempting to enroll.
Right. Jamaica and CPC, Senator Sinclair is a bit concerned about our decision to delete 10.7C because he feels it might not be fully covered by 10.7B and E. So
in respect to the attempt, in respect to the attempting to enroll.
All right. So we'll discuss that a little later, Senator Sinclair.
Yes, sir.
All right. So CP, we just leave it for a little while so we can both yourself and Jamaica last to respond to Senator Sinclair before the meeting is over. But
Chair.
Sure. Yes, CPC.
I was indicating whenever you're ready for the response, I could respond.
You want to do so now?
Sure, Chair. Section 50 of the Interpretation Act provides that a provision which constitutes an offense shall, unless a contrary intention appears, be deemed to provide also that an attempt to commit such an offense shall be an offense. So wherever an offense is provided, it includes an attempt.
Right.
Thank you very much.
So, Senator Sinclair,
satisfies the query that I had.
All right. Thanks again, CPC and Senator Sinclair. I just want to start with a brief congratulations to our NIDS head, the technical team at NIDS, Warren Vernon, who defended his PhD thesis about 2 weeks ago and has now been granted his doctorate. So I want to congratulate Warren Vernon, who is now Dr. Warren Vernon. So congratulations, Warren. And
congrats, Dr. Warren Vernon.
Congrats, congrats. You should also acknowledge the Solicitor General, who is now QC.
Right. I did so in another forum, but we congratulate the Solicitor General And also-
Congratulations to the Solicitor General too.
Right, and being elevated to the inner bar. Now, colleagues, we have two issues that we will discuss this morning. One of them is one which came to us by several contributors asking why don't we use the TRN 9 numbers. And the technical team, having discussed it with certain technical persons at TAJ, found that in fact, TAJ actually has an algorithm which does in fact provide for unique 9-digit numbers. And what is happening after discussion with the technical team and a number of my colleagues who some are with us, but not all members, we felt that we could make a recommendation to the full Joint Select Committee that indeed we could use the TRN to be the national identification number. So what that would mean is that those with TRN who want to register in the NERA will just, the NERA would just take the TRN as the NIN. Now remember, the idea was that the NERA would be generating the NIN, but if the NERA has a different, or which would be a similar algorithm as the TAJ, then the possibility would exist that you're having 9-digit numbers and you may have the same number applying to two different persons, one using the NIN and one using the TRN. So the feeling of the NIDS committee when we discuss it, and in discussion with certain technical people with a TAJ, there's no reason why the TRN could not be used to generate the NIN. Not only that, it is also consistent with the fact that the TRN is used on the driver's license. And in all the circumstances, it may well be that that number, be it the NIN or the TRN, which would then be the same, would be a number that every individual would be able to use, not only as their national identification number, but as their driver's license. And if they have to deal with transaction with the any economic transaction dealing with the government, the TRN. So that is a recommendation that we would like to adopt. But before we do so, I'm going to ask Warren to explain the rationale and how it would work. So Dr. Vernon, would you like to just present it for me, please?
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, committee members. Okay, thank you.
Chair,
Yes?
may I ask my question about clause 8 before Dr. Vernon? Congratulations.
Yes, that in fact,
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Motley, I should have prefaced it by saying this is something that we should consider because Senator Scott Mott had asked what it would be the cooperation with other bodies.
Yes, and that is what
of a cooperation with other bodies. So please go ahead.
This is exactly where I'm going, sir, because I wanted to ask Dr. Vernon to give me an indication of how we would see clause 8 operating and whether there would be a limit on the nature of the information which would be shared. And so the fact that we would be using the TRN, my question becomes even more relevant.
Sure.
Because I want to know, for example, if the TAJ would be sharing information as a result of our using TRN, and just generally, what is the extent of the sharing which would take place between different entities? So Dr. Vernon, could you just add that in your explanation, please?
Sure. And
Okay, thank you, Senator.
Senator Motley. Proceed, Warren.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. And just to respond to Senator, before I proceed, the specific cooperation in government is centered around the verification of source documentation. And I'll give a few examples. For example, you may have someone coming forward with a Jamaican birth certificate. Then there's a need for the enrollment officer to verify that birth certificate before the information is entered in the system. So that is one corporation. Similarly, if the TRN is considered by the committee, once an applicant presents a TRN, then the enrollment officer would have to verify the TRN with TAJ to ensure that one, the number was in fact issued by the TAJ, and second, to ensure that the name and date of birth is also matching. The challenge that we are going to face, however, there will be cases where a TRN that is presented to NIDS, if considered, you may very well have the name and the date of birth on the TRN side may not be matching what is on the birth certificate. Naturally, we will have to take what is on the birth certificate, but operational procedures between TAJ and NIDS could easily resolve all of those discrepancies. There are opportunities across government, especially when you talk about once only policy, where data, identification data is entered once and verified from a single source. So there are in fact opportunities for TAJ, and this is provided also for under data protection law, where TAJ will be able to request, basic verification of identity information. Naturally, you will have situations where someone turns at the TAJ and TAJ may very well request with the consent of the individual to verify, that person identity. As you move across government and in the private sector, you will also have, similar opportunities for verification. If you go to a bank, an individual will be able to authorize the bank to request the verification for the identity information. And if you're doing the verification for the identity information, what you really don't want to do for the simplification of doing business, you really don't want the individuals to be entering the same data over and over. And that is why we have always said that special provisions must be in place for biometric information, specifically fingerprint, for fingerprint not to be shared because of how sensitive it is. But if we look at the market now, in the market, it's a common practice for financial institutions and even within government to utilize a photograph and also to utilize a birth certificate information, etc. So that is just a quick summary as to how we envisage the cooperation will take place where data usage is concerned.
And just to
Chairman, could I ask a question, please?
Sure, Member.
Warren, in light of that, then, would you still require all the compulsory information which we had gone through, I think maybe last meeting or the meeting before, if you're going to be pulling the data from the TRN database? Because you would have my full name, date of birth, all of that information. So would that at all alter what would be compulsory for someone who is already in your TRN database?
Okay, and I will say no, and let me explain. When you look at the TRN database versus the NIDS database, there's a very distinct difference between the two. In the TRN database, there will always be a unique number because of the algorithm, and the algorithm won't generate the same number twice. Similarly, on the NIDS side, system is being designed to only store a number once, and we call it primary key, can only be in the database once. However, if you look at the TRN database, because of the nature, how it is designed, we cannot guarantee that the individual is unique. We can only guarantee that the number is unique. But when you look at the NIDS database, we will be able to guarantee that one, the number is unique and the individual is also unique. And why? Because of the usage of biometric information. And we would have seen our own local cases at the EOJ, the use of fingerprint to ensure that the voters list, you have unique persons on the list. We would have seen it also at the passport office when they introduced facial, they call it facial recognition, to be able to check they found multiple passports and so on. So we do have the local cases. The challenge, however, Member Robbins, is that we all know that the TRN database is not always updated with correct addresses. There are also cases where you may have the date of birth that is incorrect. Even the name of the person may be incorrect. So what we are trying to establish here is to ensure that all of the numbers that are generated nationally, those numbers are generated from a single source. But there is a need, and it's a very good point raised by Senator Scott Mutley, because this is where the opportunity for collaboration would exist to clean up not only the TRN database, but also to ensure that we have a clean register for national identification. So there are issues, the databases are not completely clean, but by going through the process, it will facilitate that. So we will be required to capture the same information, because everything that we capture, we will have to verify that information and to make sure that it is accurate. When we verify, for example, capturing the current address of the person, capturing all of the data set that is required to establish identity, and we take it through the process of verification, and we determine that it is accurate, then the tax admin could also benefit from doing appropriate verification that is allowed under law to make sure that their database is also clean. There's a bigger risk, however, because on the TRN side, the risk that exists now about having duplicate persons in the TRN database, that risk will always be there unless you have universal coverage for national identification and TRN. In other words, what I am saying is that there's no way to completely erase the risk of having two persons in the TRN database because we're not using biometric, but in the NIDS database, you will erase that. But most importantly, there's a need to generate all of the numbers from a single place. Otherwise, we run the risk of creating a NIDS that would generate a new identity for someone to start all over again. And that person may very well have a bad credit report, and you give them a complete new identity. In addition, and I think Chairman spoke about it earlier, we also run the risk of having two persons with the same number. On the left side, you have somebody with this number as their national ID. And on the other side, you may have somebody else with the same number as their TRN. So we really need to streamline to make it easy and simpler for the private sector and government to adopt and utilize it. So I'm not sure if I answer your question fully, Member Robinson.
I am sure, Warren, that, I'm sure that other questions will arise as you make the presentation.
I mean, I see it more as being beneficial to tax admin than to NIDS, quite frankly. And I think it would allow tax admin to ensure that their records are
No,
accurate.
and you're right. You're right, Member Robinson, because it seemed to me the idea that the NIN, we want to make sure that the integrity of the NIN is in order, and to the extent that persons who may, and I just put it anecdotally, have more than one TRN will be exposed. And so therefore they will have to determine which of the number that they will use once and for all. Because as you know, and I say it anecdotally, but there is some basis for saying so, that persons having generated more than one TRN have been able to get more than one driver's license. And to that extent, the NIN will assist not only TAJ, but perhaps the island authority that issued driver's license to be able to expose those who have corrupted those two systems. And that is, I think, the recommendation that we're hoping to adopt is a good one because it will assist us in clearing up any taint of the tax administration role and also maybe the driver's license. Okay? Continue, Warren.
I'm seeing Member Bunting and
Okay, Member Bunting.
raise his hand. Okay.
Yes, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I'm now not sure how this adopting the TRN number system will solve the problem of individuals having only one identity on the system. We know that the TRN system has duplications. We know it's not a sound system in the sense that persons have more than one TRN number over the years. Now, I understand the objective of this, which seems to be they want each person to have a unique 9-digit number. I'm not sure what's the magic of 9 digits. But it seems to me if we're going to adopt the numbering from a system that exists, we should do it from a system such as either the EOJ, which does cross-matching of fingerprints, or PICA, which has facial recognition software that avoids duplications or catches duplications, rather than adopting a system which has only the benefit of not repeating a number, but has repeated identities with different numbers. And I really don't see the efficiency of that. If we go to the EOJ, for example, the EOJ system, apart from having an elector ID number, which is on the card, it has, I believe, what's called a RRC number, which has many more digits than the one on the card. And we know that that is unique. Now, it would be really simple in terms of accelerating enrollment if we could have people just opt in to use their EOJ card. We already have 1.7 million or 8 million, whatever the number is, more probably two-thirds of the population already, and much higher percentage of the adult population already on the EOJ system with unique identities. It would give such a jump start to enrollment for needs that I don't see why we would be leaving the real sweet spot of either the EOJ or the passport and going to the TAJ's TRN number, which is a much smaller database, I imagine. I don't know the actual numbers, but one that is not clean. And the only advantage we're getting is that we have a unique number.
Well, my response to that, having had the discussion and sorted out with the technical team, is to indicate that the NIN, that is a national identification number, the importance that we're attaching to it is that it is a unique number that cannot be repeated once you have a particular algorithm generating it. So to the extent that the TRN has that unique feature, I'm not saying we should adopt similar things that you have mentioned in terms of peak on the facial recognition and because we're doing so in terms of the enrollment by facial recognition and also by fingerprint recognition. But this one with the TRN, why it is consistent, Member Bunting, is that if we adopt that number, it will also be the same number that you use on your driver's license. So, it's useful in the sense that the TRN is being widely used, especially not only for business transaction, but for driver's license. And we see the possibility of using of an individual having just one national number. Yes, it is the NIN, the TRN, and if there are drivers, the driver's license. So I think it's, when I consider it and I will discuss it with the NIDS team, and they're going to explain that in a moment. Then you will see why it does make sense. Senator Scott Motley, you wanted to raise you had your hand up.
I was actually, Chair, agreeing that the TRN would be a better option because my understanding of it is that you can actually obtain one before you reach the age of 18. Whereas with the voters ID, your eligibility would start at 18. So
Okay,
I
all right.
I mean,
No, I said thanks. What I would want to do is if members don't mind, is allow the Warren to explain more fully how we would proceed, and then we go back to the discussion. Is that okay? All right, Dr. Vernon, continue.
Thank you, Chairman. And my next point is somehow connected to Senator Scott Motley's point, is that when you consider a unique number, you always have to look at a universal approach, one that would cover, the entire population. And we also have to consider looking at, what is happening now and how we can leverage what is happening now. And the TRN, believe it or not, is widely used than the passport and widely used than the EOJ database. There's a bigger issue to be resolved with all of this to establish a unique ID, because once you establish a unique ID, what you're going to find is that all of government, irrespective of the entities, will be able to adopt and utilize this, unique ID. And it is for that same reason why TRN is so widely used everywhere you go. I mean, in order for me, I recall getting insurance for my daughter, and I had to get a TRN in order to get insurance. So TRN is something that everybody asking for. If you're interacting with the credit bureau, they are asking for a TRN. But to explain the specific point, the TRN, and I explained earlier that the number, irrespective of where you generate the number, because of how these algorithms are designed and how databases work, is that you always have to have a unique primary, key. You always have to have this unique number. It's not going to allow you to store the same number twice. So the benefit to gain here is not really about which source you pick that unique number from. The real benefit is how do we leverage all of the various forms of identification that we have and IDs. How do we leverage all of those to create a unique identity for an individual? And which of those can we rank in terms of their credibility to assist us to establish that unique legal identity? Naturally, as Member Fountain mentioned, the EOJ card, persons coming forward to register for a NIN, that could be a trusted ID to use to confirm someone's identity in the national ID. The passport could also be used as a trusted form of ID for those who have it to register in the NIN, in the national identification system. But there's also a part of the population that basically have no access to any of those. So we have to consider the decision in terms of universal access. How do we provide access for someone that is undocumented? How do we provide access for someone who can't afford a passport? All of those. And having looked at it with all of the technical team, including some technical persons at TAJ and within government, we are of the view that the best way to clean up this issue and to eliminate problems for future generations is to ensure that we adopt and utilize a single number, which can become a unique identifier if persons choose to do so right across government. Now, the most important component or attribute that is going to make
Before you move
this
on,
ID,
Dr. Vernon,
yes,
you have made one, you've use a phrase there that is of concern to me. You said that it's best to move to one number that will be used, and I agree with that. But then you said if someone choose to do so.
okay.
Now, bear in mind that it's not mandatory. However, when someone comes to ask for an in and they have a TRN, are they just going to be given the TRN is going to be run through a system, make it a unique ID number, and that's what they keep. Suppose they say, I don't want that.
Okay, very good point, Senator Hill. Maybe I needed to provide, further clarity.
Yes, please. That's what I'm asking for.
Yes, thank you. So when I made reference to someone, choosing to, I was basically alluding to someone who, make a conscious decision that I need a national identification card. That is what I was making reference to, because people can choose not to because it's not mandatory. However, in terms of the
having chosen,
yes.
what happens then? That's the clarity I'm looking for.
Yes, perfect.
Dr.
So
Brown.
having decide to come into the national identification system,
Yes.
then you have to provide certain mandatory requirements. Because while the national ID is voluntary, similar to driver's license, you don't have to take one. But if you decide to go in, there are certain mandatory
These are the
requirements.
rules. These are the rules.
The
Okay.
rules, yes.
Okay. I get it. Thank you.
Good. So my final point
And
on
just to
this.
clarify that point to Dr. Vernon, once they come in and they have no identification, or they don't have a TRN. If they come to register in the NIN, my understanding from discussion with your team is that then you would generate a number from the TRN, which would be not only the NIN, but that person could also use that number and they would automatically get a TRN number. Is that understanding?
Yeah, so what we'll do through collaboration, that process, the process to generate a TRN will always be owned by the TAJ. So through collaboration and automation, we will be able to request that a TRN be generated, a unique number. And the reason for this is because you really don't want to send a customer, somebody, a citizen who maybe come forward to register that may not have a TRN, and you're going to have to send them back to TAJ to get it and then come back to you. You want to simplify the process, but through cooperation and operational processes, this can be automated where the number is generated. It's being generated by TAJ, but it is a seamless process so that all of the numbers can be generated from a single database. And once that number is generated, the most important action that will be taken after that to make that number, the ultimate card, is to combine that number with fingerprints and a facial image. Naturally, you're going to have a few cases, like in any other system, where there are some persons that are not going to have any hands. Some persons, even with hands, and they have no fingerprints, and there will have to be special rules just to verify, to ensure that they are who they say they are. And those are some exceptions. When we talk to the Disabilities Association, I think the numbers are somewhere between 18 to 20 something thousand persons, with cases of that nature that we'll have to treat with specially.
Dr. Vernon, do we know what's the universe of TRN numbers out there now? Do we know if it's 500,000, a million, what it is?
Yeah, I know the TRN number is over 2 million. It's over 2 million. I don't have the exact figure. I can get it and then share it, but I know it is over 2 million the last time we spoke. And I also know that, in government, you have thousands of verification taking place, re-TRN as a unique identifier.
Okay, so over 2 million TRN numbers are in issue currently. You know that?
Well, yes, it's over that amount, but I need to get the exact figure, for the committee. I will touch base with the authorities to get the exact figure, but from previous technical discussions rather, we know it is over 2 million. But
okay, that's actually surprising to me. But I just asked if you could actually check on that for me, because if it's over 2 million, I suspect there are hundreds of thousands of duplications in there.
No, I think no, but Member Bunting, a number of those TRN numbers relate to business, like companies and businesses.
Okay, I was talking about we're talking in the context of what we're using it. We're using talking about individuals. So right. I really meant the subset
is doing, for example, certification of citizenship and passport. Those are going to be source documents to establish the unique identity for the persons who come forward to enroll. So it is a very complicated process that will basically narrow down into a simple process.
Mr. Chairman, I recall when I was minister responsible for PICA, there was a category of citizenship that was awarded. It was called citizenship by doubt.
Perfect.
Are you kidding?
Perfect.
No, I'm not kidding. And it was where, as Mr. Vernon said, particularly older persons, not so much younger persons, but persons who may have been born pre-independence. Many of them were never registered, especially in deep rural areas.
Okay.
And so there was a sort of system where the PICA had a hearing, a sort of almost like a mini tribunal that would take statements or affidavits from even older persons who lived in their communities and knew them from a child, and or christening records from the church or primary school records, etc., to be able to support that this person has been at Jamaica and living in Jamaica, even though technically a birth certificate was unavailable.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. A very good point, Mr. Bounty, because that is also integrated into our program. Because, on that same note, there are persons out there who RGD would have gone out into the field trying to do their investigation, and they just can't find any school records or other information about them. And it's the minister that would ultimately decide on that, we call the citizen in doubt, and they will get that documentation in order to register. So we took that into consideration. In fact, we have a sub-program which is supposed to be launched in the near future for undocumented persons. So that very same category that you mentioned, Mr. Bounty, persons will be able to benefit through the NIDS program. And even persons out there without any birth certificate and so on will be able to benefit and to become formalized. So very good point. I almost forgot to mention that one. All right, so those are my points on the issue concerning the national identification.
All right,
number.
You have discussed with me some other considerations. You want to
yes.
proceed with other considerations?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Let me just go.
The number, right.
Okay. Okay, so the next point we want to bring forward to the committee is that at the back of the card, we are of the view that if we include a quick response code for the adoption and usage of the card, for example, if you take it to a bank or somewhere, they could easily scan that QR code in order to read the national identification number instead of typing in the number all over. So we are recommending for consideration that at the back of the card, while it is referred to as a quick response code, but to have the appropriate language to facilitate that, where we can have the inclusion of a QR code at the back of the card. And the QR code here would be this representation. And I have an example on screen. So if this 9-digit number would be equivalent to this QR code, which can easily be scanned. So we want to put that to the committee for consideration.
We don't see a problem with that.
No, the beauty of that, Mr. Vernon, is that basically anybody who has a camera phone
you got it, yes.
can quickly capture and scan. So in terms of even persons who are queuing up to go into a facility or anything, you could just have a camera that they hold their card beside, and it would identify them and put them on very quickly. So I see the value of having something like this. And I think we're going to be going more and more into
technology,
digital transactions where vendors will be able to use their cell phones, their smartphones, etc. I think that is clearly going to be a benefit.
Yeah, and you're so right, Member Bunting. In fact, I've been indicating in my various discussion with Justice of the Peace that they better get used to the modern technology, because the smartphone may well be the only item they carry around with them to pay bills, to identify themselves, etc., etc. So that's a good idea, Dr. Vernon, and I would support that being, on the back of the card. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chairman and member. So the next point is that currently in the bill, we have as a requirement to include the card type at the back of the card. Having discussed this matter and reviewed it carefully, we are of the view that card type should be changed to the status of the individual, because below that line on the card, you have
not here. It's only my sound that has gone out.
AG?
No. AG was saying somebody's mic is on.
Okay, good.
If you want, you can turn on your video.
Am I to continue?
Okay, no problem. Continue on, Warren.
Okay, yes, thank you, Chairman. So
straightforward. Yes.
Yeah, so we are recommending that we include status. So once you look at the back of the card, you'll know who is a citizen by seeing C and the R for resident, and whatever future category that may be decided on in the future that we are not aware of, the card will be able to facilitate that in the future. So what this recommendation will basically do for us, it would simplify the entire process and reduce setup cost and complexities, because unlike other countries where they print different color cards, then as a small country, there will be no need for us to print multiple color cards or different design, but we could have a single design, and by just looking at the back of the card, we know the category.
Okay, please, host at Parliament, could you let back in Member Julian Robinson? He's trying to get back in, so please let him back in.
Okay,
okay, continue.
Yeah, any comment on this one, Chairman, or move forward?
No, that's straightforward and makes sense.
Okay, thanks.
Chairman, just to say, I think it's a good idea to designate the category in which the enrolled person falls on the back of the card. So I like the suggestion for the C and R.
Okay, thank you, AG. Okay, the next recommendation for consideration, and this, of course, we see future benefits for simplification. So we're also proposing that we could include a line at the back of the card for license to drive. So in the future, someone who wished to just have one identification card could actually have or could actually volunteer to have this optional feature.
Member Bunting, this is the one I like, and this is why I want to discuss, because you don't have to carry around your driver's license and also your national identification card. If you can drive or you have a license, you can put it on your national ID card, which simplifies the number of cards you will be carrying. Okay? You finished? Explain it.
Chairman, what you're saying, all you would need to add to the NIN,
right,
would be the category of vehicle that you are licensed to drive.
Private or general.
Right, that's all you would need to add in order to, because the rest of the information would essentially be duplicated.
Exactly.
So the NIN would double, the NIN card would double as a driver's license if we included the category of vehicles. Okay, I have no problem with that.
Wonderful.
Okay, thank you very much.
Warren.
Okay, and just to also add for further clarity that we see where savings, benefits could go to the citizens or to the customers, because currently there is a cost for the material to print and to produce the driver's license. So, and that is something that the state always have to pay for. So this could also help with the lowering of the price for a driver's license. We don't know by how much or what the amount is, but there are a lot of opportunities there on the collaboration.
Wonderful.
And but wouldn't this couldn't this similarly apply to any license that you have, government issued license I'm talking about?
Definitely.
Why would you restrict just the drivers?
So when you look at the back of the card, we have limited space. And when we discuss this matter technically, because the scope for collaboration is significant and all of it cannot hold on the card. So we have to adopt the principle where verification is done off the card. But when we look at all of the IDs now, we realize that the little space that we have, the driver's license is used more frequently, and you may have a wider spread. However, that is not limiting us for other entities to adopt and utilize the national identification card for verification. The challenge, however, is that because you can't place everything on the card, they would have to work out their process to facilitate verification of the card. And you see why it is important for us to have a universal, this unique number right across for the entire country, where persons can adopt and utilize it. So if you look at farmer's ID, for example, whosoever managing that database or all the other databases could easily adopt and utilize that unique number or identifier for verification. Maybe they can use an app, because that is where we are going with technology instead of printing physical cards. So there are a lot of opportunities, and that is one of the reasons why we decided as technical people not to recommend to print the address on the card, because the address is something that will change so quickly. There are persons who will change their address every month, and there are some people who really don't have an address. So it was against that background, Mr. Bounty.
All right, continue, Warren.
I just think that this benefit, Mr. Chairman. I understand the limitations of the space on the back of the card, but as we're going more and more into the digital age, the value of the card in reducing the duplication across so many different government or quiz or professional licenses that are issued. If there was a way that these could be consolidated so that once an authorized person has the card number, they can, let me just use an example. If policeman, for example, stop somebody in a vehicular checkpoint, they may not only be able to verify from the number that the person is a legitimate driver's license, but also a firearm license, for example. If a person,
okay.
you know, there are other things that it would be convenient that some authorized person can look at the NIN and be able to know immediately that this person has these set of licenses, or at least government issued licenses on the system.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Perfect recommendation. Good. All right. So the next point we want to put forward, these are issues that we would have discussed in the past, and these are issues naturally going to inform the regulations that we are preparing, because we were asked to make sure we have the draft regulations by the end of the month. So I want to put this to the committee also for consideration in terms of the age at which, you know, a minor is required to provide fingerprint. We are recommending age 6. Research out there, you know, would have shown that the fingerprint, you know, is readable from age 6. Naturally, the fingerprint will change over time for minors. So the next time the minor, you know, the renewal of the identification is taking place, new prints can be taken until you get to about age 18, where you'll have some level of consistency, you know, with the prints. And just to use an example here, looking at the EU visa code, because we're just trying to figure out how other countries treating with the use of fingerprints for minors. And in the EU, for their visa code is from 12 years. In Denmark, you know, they do capture fingerprint from age 6. And as the technical people, we tend to look at the Nordic countries because they have good social programs, you know, for their people. And that is one of the reasons why we are suggesting age 6. We are also putting to the committee the age at which an individual would be required to provide a facial image. And since we really don't want to leave anybody behind, the proposal is to have the facial image or the picture be captured from birth, similar to a passport. A baby, you know, will have their picture in the passport for identification. Naturally, once they get to the age to go to school, and not only school, but also daycare, they will be able to utilize this identification card. Just a point to note that when you look at the picture of a minor, especially a child, it may not be completely compliant with the International Civil Aviation Organization standards, because you have to set the face a particular way. But you know, there are a lot of relaxed rules around the globe where minors are concerned, and they tend to more lean towards the identity of the parent once they have, you know, the basic information established. So we believe that we should start from birth to take a picture, and this will be useful too, because from birth, even with missing.
So these are your recommendations you're asking the committee to accept, right?
Yes, Chairman, because they will help us with the finer details in terms of the regulations that we are preparing, the draft regulations, because these are finer details that we think we could bring.
I have no problem with them.
Dr. Vernon, I've seen where, for example, hospitals take I'm not sure whether it's a footprint or a heel print of babies, infants just born. Is that a universal way of identifying babies?
Well, yes, you know, globally the footprint is one component, you know, for biometric, but after the Supreme Court's ruling, you know, we minimize significantly the data set to be captured, because we believe if you have the facial image and the child is attached to the parent, then you will be able to continue to establish identification. but they do utilize footprint in South America and also in some of the EU countries. They do take footprint as a form of identification. So you're correct. But for the NIDS program, we decided not to go down that route because we want to keep minimum data.
Dr. Vernon, I really want to hear your presentation in full, but you do recall that fingerprints under the Fingerprints Act, which is what we do have in the bill, can include palm print and footprint.
Yes, absolutely. But
and so it is not really that accurate to say that we have minimized that aspect of it, because we do live in our definition. And maybe you should take back a look at it to see if that was what was intended, because it does include palm print and footprint presently. Just an observation that I think you should be aware of, having regard to what you just said.
Okay, thank you very much. The policy intent is only to have fingerprints and facial image. So if we're taking that point, and I think if there are gaps where that is concerned, it's something that we will have to fix, because I know the policy direction is to minimize and just to take fingerprints and facial image only. And I agree with you, Senator.
Chairman, Dr. Vernon, I thought the taking of the palm or the sole of the toe would be in the alternative in the event that someone was without fingers and therefore unable to give those prints, but any other part that would enable the uniqueness.
My understanding, you're right, AG, my understanding is in the event the fingerprints cannot be obtained, then you can use the palm.
So we have to ensure that the language of the legislation is clear in respect of that.
Right. I understand the policy, but that is not the definition of fingerprints, AG.
Right, but no, but
I understand that's not what is intended. That is why I'm saying take back a look at the definition of fingerprints in the fingerprint.
That is correct. You're quite correct.
Yes, good point.
Senator Scott Motley, we'll look back at that. Yes.
Okay, good.
And just to be clear, my suggestion for footprint was specifically to infants, as it was a more reliable identifier than a picture, a facial image or a picture.
All right, check on that, please, Dr. Vernon, especially for Member Mountain say for children. I mean, babies.
Yes. So we are in fact aware of all of those options. So I was just making reference to to the policy intent, but he's correct. The issue, however, is that for the purpose and intent of what we really want to do, we really want to minimize the data that is captured. And I'm happy that Senator Bountin clarified that footprints for minors, because imagine we're taking footprints for adults, because you do have adults without hands.
All right, is that the end of this your panel?
It's not, Chairman, because Dr. Vernon just confirmed for me, isn't a footprint considered a biometric?
Yes, it is a part of your biometric. Yes.
So understand you're adding another biometric.
No.
He said fingerprints, Minister Hill. Fingerprints, but what AG intervened to say, in the event that the fingerprints cannot
I'm speaking about footprints for minors, for babies.
Right, or palms where fingerprints cannot be obtained.
No, sir. We are mixing two things. Senator Bunting just added something that is significant that we should not skip over without recognizing it. He has added another biometric that was not in the menu that we had before. Anytime you add a biometric, it's an issue. So let's be aware that's what's happening.
He has asked the NIDS team to examine that alternative for babies.
I understand that.
Right.
I'm not saying no at all. I'm not even against it. I'm
Yes,
just
okay.
recognize what has happened. You've added a new biometric.
Well, if I may, Chairman, and thank you, Senator Hill, for raising that point, because we need to be clear, because that can significantly impact design, and we also have to consider, and there are a lot of cost implications as to how they're going to capture that information, because most times when you're looking at footprints and so on, globally, they tend to capture that data for civil registration purposes. And while it is useful, but there can be major cost implications, and we will have to measure carefully if the cost to do this, will really return that level of value because of how civil registration work. But what I can comment on, I know the policy that was given to us as civil servants to implement is that the fingerprints and the facial image is really what is being considered for biometric, and not to include the additional ones. Because really and truly, even though all the biometrics that you think about will add value, but do we really need them? And from a technical side, I would say we really don't need them, because when you look at the outliers in making this decision, is there really a significant number for this to be considered? While I don't have the scientific information here, and we can always check across civil registration at the birthing centers to see how this is handled and to know the numbers so we can inform the committee, we really would have to examine it carefully, because there are a lot of implications if we add an additional biometric.
Mr. Vernon, I appreciate your concentration and efficacy and ability to capture access. But my point was not that at all. My point was on the issue of privacy. Because the moment you add a new biometric, the privacy hawks are going to go after you. I just want the committee to understand that you're now adding a new biometric. That
No, no, it was proposed, but we're not
passed at all.
No, we're not agreeing. I think the only exception we would put is where the fingerprint was not readily or is not possible to capture. That was always there.
Yes, but Chairman, Senator Bunting issue was not that at all.
No, I know, but
let's decide if we're going to do it or not, because it's
I would say, that Senator Bunting was making the point that for children, it is easier to, or some other states use the footprints. But we don't have to, if you don't mind, Senator Bunting, he mentioned it, but the impression I'm getting from Dr. Vernon, it is not necessary, since we're capturing the facial recognition. And at age 6, we will then take the fingerprint.
But Chairman,
the footprints, lock it down.
Chairman?
Yes.
The point, as I understood it, is that to the extent that you are seeking to capture something that is unique, at an early stage for a child, a facial image may not do that because of the rapidity with which features change during childhood.
Right.
And so the other option would be a better option. That is my understanding of the gist of the suggestion from Member Bunting. And also given that hospitals use that as part of their own system.
And my only point is understand you're adding a new biometric. Deal with that. So let's move on.
And at the first renewal of the card, when that infant or baby is now 5 or 10, whatever I can't remember the relevant renewal period, it would then be replaced with the photograph and the fingerprint.
Dr. Vernon, is something for you to consider and something we can examine again when we look at the report, okay? When we get to the draft report.
We should examine it again, but it is something that the technical team would have looked at before. and it will be costly, and we think, you know, there are really alternate ways to do this because of the fact that a minor, you know, will be usually is linked to an adult
Right.
for registration. So again, you know, I need to crunch the numbers and look at numbers so I can say whether or not if it is significant in terms of the wide scale usage, but we don't think it is necessary. It would change the scope of the project and create a lot of problems for us. And the human rights groups and other persons are going to come at us to say that we are, you know, we are going too deep, and it's not necessary. And these are lessons learned from previous iterations of the bill that, you know, we would suggest that, you know, consideration be given not to maybe go that route, but to benefit rather from the existing ecosystem within the hospitals for civil registration to capture information of this nature.
All right. Okay. Thanks then, Dr. Vernon. That's it for the new considerations, right? We need some time, 10, 15 minutes to look at the inspectorate, right? So
okay, yes. Thank you. So I will just stop here so that we can quickly look at the inspectorate.
Right. Colleagues, I did mention that we have been in discussion with the EOJ, the ECJ, for them, and they have fully agreed that they are on board. And in fact, they're not only willing, but eager to participate in the national identification system. My initial discussion with them had intimated that we would only use the select members to be the inspectorate, but they came back to say that it's the full committee of 4 selected members and 4 nominated members, that is what they would want. And after discussion amongst my colleagues, including the AG, who feel that we should support the ECJ, that the full, all 8 members should form the inspectorate, we are of the view that we should adopt the recommendation of the ECJ, that the full ECJ, that is the 4 selected members and the 4 nominated members, should constitute the inspectorate as indicated in the bill itself, even though the bill will have to do some tweaking to ensure that this recommendation and acceptance by the ECJ, that the Schedule 4 reflect this recommendation. So colleagues, I just want us to just indicate the recommendation that the NITS team has now accepted is because the NITS team initially had said just the 4 selected members, but after discussion with the ECJ, they now feel, and we have accepted basically, and that we should use all 8 members. Obviously, there were considerations that the 4 nominated members represented political input, but as in discussion with my good friend the AG and Senator Hill and others, we feel that it is about time we stop delegitimizing our political representatives. And I agree that this could be a very important way forward, because this inspectorate will be reporting as a commission to Parliament. And it's very important that we keep them as a body, as the chairman of the ECJ reiterated, and that they can operate as a body to report to, as a commission of Parliament, and to report directly to the Parliament itself. The main consideration is that certain administrative details will be worked out as to how the inspectorate will operate to be an oversight body of the NERA. But it seemed to me that from its very inception, the ECJ was always seen as one to be involved with the national identification system. And they are so happy when we spoke to them that we have accepted, and they're eager to participate. So basically, that is the outline. Kamika had some details, which she can just briefly, Kamika? Is Kamika on? Just outline in brief details how it will operate for us, please, Kamiko.
Good morning, Chair. Let me just share a brief PowerPoint with the committee.
You have to do a summary though.
Right, very brief, Chair. So the document, of course, just seeks to indicate to, let me put this down. Right, it just seeks to indicate how the inspectorate would be established, utilizing the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. And this is a brief diagram. So the Parliament, of course, would be reported to by the inspectorate. The chairman would be the same chairman from the ECJ, and the commissioners and the director of election would also be a part of the inspectorate. You will see here that there are the 4 nominated commissioners, the 3 selected commissioners, and the member being the director of elections, who is responsible for the day-to-day operations of the Electoral Office of Jamaica. Right, so essentially the Electoral Commission would constitute and carry out the functions of the inspectorate. And that would be done by effectively adding as a function of the ECJ, the performance of any functions of the inspectorate under the NERO legislation. So it's important to note, though, that there will be a need for the benefits of this policy to be communicated to the Jamaican public, so that any perception that the roles and functions of the inspectorate are not in fact different from the roles and functions of the ECJ, despite the fact that the same persons are carrying them out, must be minimized in that manner. So there will be a need for the benefits to be clearly communicated. The operational functions would be carried out in the same way as it is now carried out within the Electoral Commission. So the Electoral Commission is supported operationally by the Electoral Office of Jamaica, and that is headed by the Director of Elections. Now, the Secretary, in the same manner, the Secretariat supporting the inspectorate would comprise the staff of the Electoral Office of Jamaica, who would be under the stewardship of the Director of Elections. But importantly, any other person that's required to provide services would that don't exist within the electoral office for whatever reason, perhaps it's a specialized skill, the inspectorate would be still receiving the opportunity to be able to employ or retain those services. The core personnel would be required to be a part of the inspectorate, and these are those persons: an accountant, information and communications technology, an attorney at law, and we would need guidance from the committee to indicate whether or not this attorney at law should have experience of a particular nature noted specifically in the bill. An individual who has experience in telecommunications industry, and an individual with experience in organizational management.
Kamika, could we just deal with that? An attorney at law with at least 10 years. I mean, you're
10 years.
If members can agree with, say, 10 years, I need for 15 years is acceptable.
Very well, Chair.
I would suggest we do 10 years. Is that okay, members of the committee? Yes. I recommend 10.
That's fine. That's fine with me. That's
Yes,
fine.
Chairman, I concur.
Thank you. Noted.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, just 1 minute. Might I ask as well? I know that we continue morning and apologies for lateness, but just in respect of the qualification in respect of experience in the telecoms industry, is it telecoms that we need per se, or is it ICT? Meaning, is it someone with technology experience as opposed to someone in the telecoms industry?
Right, IT industry, not telecommunication industry, Kamika.
Very well, Chair.
But Mr.
Sorry, but there's preference to both.
It's there already.
Mr. Chairman,
Oh, yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
why would these people have to be core personnel? Couldn't we leave it to the electoral office to determine whether they need these skill sets?
Good point.
May not need it to be full-time all the time. At points in time, they may get consultants you know, to support their operations. But I don't think we need to prescribe whether these are core personnel versus whether these are skills that the EOJ can engage from time to time.
Member Bunting, I think that's a good point. Kamika, although rather than say would be required, would say would be suggested and as needed basis to see, because the ECJ would be able to determine who they need to be able to properly oversight the NERA. I think that's the point you're making about it. Yes, AG.
Chairman,
You're breaking up a bit.
we also but I believe it may be better to leave the specific expertise to an administrative purposes.
Absolutely.
Instead of specifying in the law.
Exactly.
Very well,
So
Chair.
I think it should be broader that we leave it to the administration to determine who they need.
Very well, Chair. Thank you for that. Right.
Okay. Sorry,
right.
just to clarify, so that means we'll be taking out all of those categories.
Yes, Senator.
All right, okay, because I was otherwise going to make the point that I was aware that ICT was there, but was asking that if telecoms was necessary, as the need was really ICT. But thank you very much for the clarification.
Go ahead.
As a Commissioner of Parliament, the inspectorate would be responsible to the Parliament, and any reporting functions would be carried out by keeping the President of the Senate and Speaker of the House of Representatives informed. Now, this would be different from the current arrangement which the ECJ has, whereby the ECJ actually links to the Parliament by way of the Minister with responsibility for electoral affairs. It is not thought by the team that it would be appropriate to utilize that arrangement for this particular commission.
No, that makes sense. It reports to the Parliament rather than to the leader of the government business who is responsible for electoral matters.
So, well, Chairman, let me just say that though we have to take care to ensure that things are being done orderly. While you see, there is a process by which matters get to the floor of Parliament and are tabled, and I would say that we take care to ensure that we are not tinkering with those. The standing orders, however, they are respected. They are regulations of the Constitution, and although the House is empowered to determine its own procedure, I do believe that it makes good sense, good governance sense, to have a process by which matters get to the floor to ensure that things are in order and in compliance with the rules. So it's not about, sometimes we conflate issues and think that by passing something through an appropriate office, it may equate to interference with it. That is not necessary.
I think the idea though, AG, is that it should go to the president and speak via the leader of the House in both the president, the Senate and the House.
No, Chair, that was not the idea. The idea was that the ECJ is the sole commission of Parliament that directly interacts with one member, one parliamentarian versus the presiding officers of the Parliament. And therefore the thought process was that, like other commissions of Parliament, the inspectorate would report to the Parliament via the President and the Speaker. And in the same manner as all the other commissions, they'd be required to ensure that this information is brought to the attention of all members of Parliament, whether by tabling or otherwise.
Yeah, I take the point in that this function is different from the other functions that the ECJ performs, and therefore you need a separate reporting responsibility. So, but rather than just leaving it as loose as saying, by keeping the president of the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives informed, that could be, in a relatively informal way. I would say by sending a periodic report, whether it be annually or so on, a report to Parliament. Now that those are sent, but might be sent via the presiding officers, but I think it should be, rather than keeping two persons informed, I think it should be reporting to Parliament as a whole.
Yes, yes, I think.
In addition to that, Chairman, I just want to
You're breaking up a bit.
say that we will move. Sorry about that. I'm actually commuting. I'm just saying we have to get to the stage where reports from commissions of Parliament are not simply tabled and left to the discretion of members to go through, that those reports, special sessions must be convened to deal with them. We have kind of gone in that direction with the Integrity Commission, because what we do have now is somewhat anomalous and not quite adequate to deal with the good governance issues of the matter under the commissions of Parliament.
Yes,
and they're reporting back to Parliament.
What could be suggested, consistent with what Member Bunton is saying, that they should report to Parliament at least annually and such other periodic basis as they see fit, something to that effect. Would that be okay, Senator Bunton? In other words, they must send a report at least annually.
Right, I think at a minimum annually, but if a matter arises that they feel they would want to give a special interim report, then I think that would be fine as well.
Absolutely. So we put it that way, Kamika.
Yes, sure. That's further down in the presentation. There was another query. It is being suggested that though the inspectorate has the flexibility to decide on the skills, due to the nature of the information that the inspectorate may be privy to, that persons carrying out the supporting services should be required to meet certain eligibility requirements. However, noting the previous comments, we asked the committee to indicate their thoughts on that particular matter as to whether or not those eligibility requirements are necessary within this context. And the eligibility requirements would be these. So if there is practically, therefore, if there are staff members within the electoral office who do not meet the requirements, then those persons would not be able to assist.
Kamika, these are details if members don't mind.
Again, Mr. Chairman, the Electoral Commission of Jamaica is a very competent body. Exactly. I don't think we have to prescribe details there.
Very well. So we will remove. Right. So those will be removed. Just to note that the functions of the inspectorate are modified from the bill to remove any overlap between the duties of the Information Commissioner and the National Identification and Registration Inspectorate.
What would be useful for us to consider is when you put in some of this information in the fourth schedule, for us to look at it, colleagues, when we look at the report and also the revised bill. So the revised bill, which will include some of what Kamika is referring to. What we will do as normal in reports, we'll ask the CPC to detail the changes in red in the present bill, so we can identify what should be accepted based on all the discussions we have had over the last few months, including the fourth schedule, detailing the changes to the rules in the relation to the inspectorate, now that we have identified who will be the inspectorate. So that if that is so, we will spend a little more time on it when the report comes forward, colleagues, when the changes to the fourth schedule that dealt with the inspectorate, when they're put into the fourth schedule, bearing in mind it's the ECJ that will be that oversight body as the inspectorate. So that, colleagues, what we are going to ask is that to ask CPC and the NIDS team to try and put together as much as possible a lot of the concerns which we have addressed over the last few weeks, and then to provide us with a report ASAP, so we can spend some time examining and then sign off on that report. So if that is okay, I'm sorry to rush you, but we're at 10 o'clock and I know they have another ZOSA meeting. So is that okay, colleagues? If that is okay, we can sign off and then we will refer back to you very soon as to when the report is ready, which will be circulated before we set another meeting or meetings for consideration of the report and the proposed revised bill. Is that okay, everyone?
That's okay with me, Chairman.
If that means so, because we are now over time, I'm going to ask for a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Thank you, AG. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
And we're hoping to get back to you with ASAP. Thanks, Kamika. Thanks, Dr. Vernon and your team. Thanks to AG department. Thanks to CPC. We'll be in touch. I know CPC has been working very hard and we'll be in touch with you again soon, CPC. Thanks to everyone. And law reform, thanks again. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Chair.
Record.
We work to make communities safer by essentially looking at the structures in the community that contribute greatest to social capital building. Try to reinforce, build, and establish those structures in a way that